She came with beauty, charm, and promises of family, but behind closed doors, a huge financial trap was waiting. This is the story of Keeta Vaccaro, whose marriage to NFL star Tyreek Hill spiraled from love into betrayal, luxury, and legal chaos. And at the peak of it all, Keeta buys a 196k Bentley using child support money. The question is, was she ever a struggling mother only trying to support her child, or was every move a calculated plan? How did devotion turn into deception? Today, we will be uncovering the full truth surrounding NFL player Tyreek Hill and Keeta Vaccaro's chaotic marriage. Chaos unfolding. It was all roses and champagne, candles and sweet promises when Tyreek Hill decided to make Keeta Vaccaro his wife. The world saw love and future plans. But behind that glittering beginning was a storm waiting to break. Today, the courtroom is the battleground. The headlines are screaming, allegations fly, financial records spill secrets. Legal filings are stacked so high they could make a skyscraper sweat. But no one was prepared for the shock when Keeta Vaccaro recently bought a Bentley worth $196,000 using money that was supposed to help raise her child and support her through divorce. Yes, a $196,000 Bentley purchased while asking the court for more child support. Crazy, right? But it gets even more intense from here. And here is the real question. Was she ever truly asking for that money to support her child? Or was she simply trying to bankroll her luxury life? What exactly went so wrong? How did a love story become a financial battlefield? To understand the gravity of this scandal, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Let's start with how this story really began. Tyreek Hill, star wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, is one of the most explosive players in the NFL. On the field, he is speed, precision, and dominance. Off the field, his life has often been followed by cameras, commentary, and controversy. He earns millions of dollars each season, signs massive contracts, and lives a lifestyle few people on earth can imagine. That kind of money does not just buy comfort, it attracts attention. And sometimes, it attracts problems that money alone cannot solve. In November of 2023, Hill married Keeta Vaccaro, a businesswoman, entrepreneur, and reality television personality known for her role on Netflix's WAGs to Riches. She also happens to be the sister of former NFL safety Kenny Vaccaro. From the outside, this looked like a perfect alignment. Football royalty meets ambition, fame meets opportunity, power meets proximity. And many believe this was the beginning of a solid, well-matched partnership. But that wedding was not the beginning of the story. It was closer to the middle. Their relationship had already been building publicly for years. In 2021, Tyreek and Keeta went public as a couple. Social media posts showed vacations, designer outfits, luxury settings, and moments of affection that painted a picture of a couple deeply involved in each other's lives. They even launched joint projects together, signaling not just romance but business alignment. And in July 2021, Tyreek proposed. An engagement followed, and with it came expectations. Big expectations. Some people saw this as a power couple in the making, a superstar athlete and a woman carving her own brand in business and entertainment. Others, looking closer, noticed warning signs. Not proof, not accusations, just patterns that would later become impossible to ignore. At the time, the narrative was love, progress, and shared success. And that is how it always begins. Fast forward to November 2023, and the wedding finally happens. The ceremony marks what many thought was the closing of a long courtship and the start of stability, marriage, commitment, family. For Tyreek, it appeared to be a settling down moment. For Keeta, it was a transition into an even more visible role as the wife of one of the NFL's highest profile players. Everything looked official. Everything looked secure. But here is where the story starts to crack. By January 2024, barely 2 months into the marriage, turbulence surfaced. Tyreek Hill briefly filed for divorce. That filing was later described as a legal mistake and was dismissed. But legal mistakes do not happen in a vacuum. Divorce papers do not appear out of thin air. That single filing sent a message to anyone paying attention. Something was already wrong. And once a marriage reaches the point where divorce paperwork is drafted, even briefly, the foundation is no longer solid. Still, the couple moved forward publicly. The narrative did not collapse just yet. In July 2024, Tyreek and Keeta announced they were expecting their first child together. A pregnancy announcement often signals hope, a reset, a chance to rebuild. And for many watching from the outside, this seemed like the turning point. Marriage trouble followed by new life, a familiar story arc. Then in November 2024, their daughter Capri was born. A child should have been the anchor, a reason to slow down, a reason to stabilize. For a moment, the public believed the storm had passed. A family had been formed. A future seemed locked in. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting. Fame magnifies everything. Money accelerates conflict. And unresolved issues do not disappear just because a child arrives. They often grow louder. By the time April 2025 arrived, The image of a perfect family had already begun to collapse under the weight of unresolved conflict. Public appearances still suggested stability, but the reality inside the home told a very different story. Tension had built steadily over time, disagreements had intensified, and the foundation of the marriage had weakened to a point where repair no longer seemed possible. On April 7, 2025, that private strain became public when police were called to the couple's luxury Miami condominium following a report made by Keeta's mother regarding a domestic dispute. Officers responded and evaluated the situation. According to the incident report, they were informed that during a heated argument, Tyreek Hill had thrown a laptop to the floor and grabbed their infant daughter. After reviewing the circumstances, law enforcement determined that no crime had been committed and no arrests were made. Even so, the presence of police marked a turning point. When a marriage reaches a stage where law enforcement becomes involved, the damage often extends beyond what can be undone behind closed doors. Whatever efforts may have existed to hold the relationship together had clearly reached their limit. The following day, on April 8, 2025, Keeta Vaccaro formally filed for divorce from Tyreek Hill. No delay. No reconciliation attempt, no cooling off period. One day after the police visit, the marriage was legally challenged. That timing raised eyebrows. It raised questions, and it signaled that this was no longer about working things out. This was about positioning, and that is where the chaos truly unfolded. Conflicts and divorce. The marriage of Tyreek Hill and Keeta Vaccaro lasted barely a year and a half. From the outside looking in, it seemed romantic and full of promise. But by April 2025, that promise had turned into bitter conflict and courtroom filings that exposed every financial move, every argument, and every contested claim. What once looked like a union blessed by success and opportunity had become a cautionary tale about how quickly love can decay when pressure, power, and perception collide. At the heart of their split were claims and counterclaims, public stories layered over private pain, and accusations that immediately set the tone for everything that followed. Amid domestic dispute reports and serious allegations, Keeta claimed that Tyreek was emotionally neglectful and at times physically aggressive during heated arguments. According to court documents and media coverage, these allegations were not framed as isolated moments, but as part of a pattern that she said had been building over time, quietly at first, and then with increasing intensity. In her narrative, marriage did not fall apart overnight. She described a relationship that deteriorated behind closed doors. Her disagreements escalated, communication broke down, and trust eroded piece by piece. To her supporters, these claims sounded like the painful truth of a woman finally speaking out. To critics, they sounded like the opening move in a legal battle where narrative control mattered as much as evidence. Either way, the accusations ensured that this divorce would not unfold quietly. Tyreek's legal team wasted no time responding. They firmly denied the allegations, describing them as exaggerated, misleading, and legally unfounded. According to his attorneys, claims were not supported by police findings or criminal charges. They argued that the timing of the accusations raised serious questions about motive, framed the situation as an attempt to generate negative publicity and gain leverage in what was quickly becoming a high-stakes divorce. From their perspective, the narrative being pushed in public did not reflect the reality of the marriage or the events surrounding its collapse. They emphasized that no arrests had been made following the police visit, and that law enforcement had found no basis for criminal action. In their telling, the situation was being inflated beyond its facts, transformed into something far more sinister than what the evidence could support. Made this conflict so combustible was that both sides understood the power of perception. This was not simply a dispute between two private individuals. It was a battle unfolding under the glare of media attention, social commentary, and public judgment. Every allegation carried consequences beyond the courtroom. Every denial carried risks of its own. In a world where public opinion often moves faster than the law, controlling the story became a form of warfare. The public watched as each side painted a starkly different picture of their marriage. In one version, the relationship was marked by instability, emotional strain, moments of fear. In the other, it was a marriage that struggled under pressure, ended amid misunderstandings that were later weaponized. Social media, sports commentary, and celebrity news outlets quickly took sides, turning a deeply personal conflict into a spectacle. Some observers argued that the issues were rooted in deeper problems from the very beginning, pointed to the rapid progression of the relationship, early engagement, the blending of personal lives with public brands as warning signs that the foundation may never have been as solid as it appeared. Others viewed the situation as another example of a high-profile relationship collapsing under the weight of fame, money, and constant scrutiny. To them, this was not about villains or victims, about the corrosive effect of pressure on intimacy. Still, the timing of events made neutrality difficult. Official filing for divorce came the day after police were called to their home, a sequence that ensured the separation would forever be linked to that incident in the public imagination. Even without criminal charges, the symbolism was powerful. Marriage reaches the point where law enforcement is involved, reconciliation becomes unlikely, public trust becomes fragile. In hours of the filing, his attorneys moved swiftly, began working to establish temporary support payments, custody arrangements, spousal support considerations, structured parenting schedules for their daughter, Capri. That point was around 5 months old. The speed of these actions signaled that this divorce would be handled aggressively and strategically, passively or informally. Acting quickly, Keeta's legal team positioned her as a parent seeking stability and protection for her child in the midst of upheaval. For supporters, this looked like responsibility. Skeptics, it looked like preparation for a drawn-out legal confrontation. Even before this marriage began to unravel, Tyreek's personal history ensured that every development would be magnified. Over the years, he has fathered multiple children with different women. His relationships have periodically drawn public attention and legal involvement. While those past situations were separate from his marriage to Keeta, formed a backdrop that influenced how the new allegations were received. Critics, Tyreek's past relationships became evidence that the marriage's collapse fit into a larger narrative. His supporters, same history was used to argue that he was being judged not on facts, on reputation. Either way, ensured that this divorce would be analyzed through a wider lens than most. This pattern made the legal fight with Keeta even more public and sensational. Every filing was dissected. Every statement was interpreted. Sports fans, celebrity commentators, and legal analysts all weighed in, often blending fact with speculation. What should have been a private dissolution of marriage became a public referendum on character, responsibility, power. The divorce moved forward. The conflicts were no longer confined to emotional grievances, hardened into formal legal disputes over money, custody, and credibility. Questions emerged about financial responsibility, parenting roles, and the truthfulness of competing narratives. Each side began building a case not just to end the marriage, to define what that marriage had truly been. Tyreek and Keeta. It was clear that the end of their marriage marked the beginning of a far more complex and consequential battle. Let's consider the ex-couple's legal disputes over money, custody, and credibility. Legal battles and finance. Once the divorce filings were underway, the financial battle escalated with the force of a storm. Court documents revealed a reality that stunned even seasoned observers. Before any judge had issued a single order for support, Tyreek Hill had already voluntarily provided Keeta Vaccaro with a total of $714,000 in various forms of financial aid. That is nearly $750,000 handed over before the court required him to do so. Pause for a moment and consider that. $750,000. For a judge weighed a single argument, for a hearing, for any ruling. The breakdown of that money was as precise as it was striking. $100,000 of it went toward Keeta's legal fees, ensuring she could be represented at the highest level in what was already becoming a highly publicized case. $100,000 was set aside as a car allowance. $100,000 was released as a lump sum. $17,500 was provided as temporary child support. Dollar was documented, payment recorded. Despite this enormous outflow, went to court asking for far more. Requests were jaw-dropping. Filings, she demanded temporary support of more than $37,000 per month, a figure that would dwarf the median household income in most of the United States. On top of that, she sought retroactive child support exceeding $325,000 to cover part of 2025. Simply, she was asking for sums that were far beyond what Tyreek had already voluntarily provided. Public watching, this raised urgent questions. Ask for more when so much had already been given. Exactly did she claim she needed these funds for? Spending records came into play, and they added a new layer of shock. $100,000 car allowance, it turned out, was not merely spent on a vehicle within budget. Purchased a brand new Bentley priced at $196,000. She had exceeded the car allowance by $96,000. Overseeing the case did not mince words. Additional expenditure was described as excessive and unnecessary in the context of her claims. And consider the implications. What was meant, at least in part, to support a household and provide for a child had been redirected toward a luxury vehicle almost $200,000 in value. We call that a personal choice. Called it excessive. No dramatic exaggeration here. Official, documented record. Bentley was only the beginning of the financial picture. Filings revealed that Keeta had also used the funds Tyreek provided to pay off a Tesla she already owned, $37,000 on business ventures, and transferred $60,000 into an investment account. These moves was legal, within her rights as the recipient of the money. Context matters. Family law, judges examine not only what money was spent, but why it was spent, and whether it aligns with the claimed purpose. In this case, the judge noted that most of these expenditures did not directly benefit the child they shared. Money supposedly intended to support the family, yet being used in ways that were discretionary rather than essential. Lawyers themselves paint a stark picture. January 2026 hearing, the court observed that after all these purchases, Keeta had only about $19,000 left from the $714,000 Tyreek had given her, a fraction of the total. $750,000 provided, and enough remained to cover even a few months of ordinary living expenses. Tyreek continued to pay the nearly $20,000 monthly rent on the Miami condo where Keeta and their daughter lived. He continued to cover health insurance. He continued to shoulder obligations that were well beyond the typical responsibilities of a separated parent. The request for more financial support persisted. This contrast became a lightning rod for public discussion. Media erupted and screamed. Sections divided into camps defended Keeta's spending, insisting she had every right to manage her finances as she saw fit. Questioned the logic of seeking additional child support while making purchases that were clearly luxury-driven. Quickly moved beyond the case itself. It became a cultural conversation about entitlement, responsibility, and what true support means when millions are involved. Controversy did not stop there. She presented herself as a businesswoman during the divorce proceedings, claiming her ventures and entrepreneurial pursuits justified continued financial support. Filings showed no reported income from those businesses during this period. Moved in, but did not come back out in profits. It was funneled into business expenses, investments, and other discretionary spending rather than child-related needs. The distinction mattered. Versus impact, need versus choice, became a measuring stick for every dollar. Several points, observers asked themselves, was it about necessity or opportunity? Was spending to maintain a lifestyle that had been comfortable during the marriage, or was it a strategic move to strengthen her negotiating position in court? Questions were not idle speculation. They were central to how the judge framed temporary support and spousal allocations. When it was said and done, the judge made a ruling that reflected both restraint and clarity. It awarded $5,500 per month in temporary spousal support. It was far below the $37,000 per month she had requested. Clear message: extravagant personal spending does not justify elevated support claims. Remained responsible for child support, housing payments, and insurance coverage. The decision emphasized accountability and restraint. It is not infinite. It was unwilling to reward excess when need could not be demonstrated. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Many celebrated the ruling as a stand against unchecked luxury spending funded by another party's income. Others criticized the court that high net worth individuals require higher standards of support and that ruling might be too restrictive. The nation went beyond the Hill-Vaccaro case. It's a broader discussion about how wealth, marriage, and responsibility intersect in America, especially in high-profile situations where public attention amplifies every move. Legal filings, social media debates, and financial disclosures, one remained unavoidably clear. A child lived at the center of this storm. Born in November 2024, was barely a year old at the time of these filings. Her experiences were already entangled with headlines about domestic disputes, legal bills, luxury purchases, and contested custody arrangements. The child's well-being, while always cited as a priority, became inseparable from the financial and reputational battle raging between her parents. For a moment, the first months of a child's life, traditionally a time of nurturing and stability, defined publicly by allegations, lawsuits, and questions about how money was spent. Discussion of child support and spousal allocation was immediately interpreted in light of her presence, her needs, and the optics of the household she would grow up in. Were focused on fairness and legal guidelines. The media focused on drama and spectacle. For Capri was quietly devastating. She was witness, however indirect, to a financial and legal war whose outcome would shape her environment for years to come. The January 2026 hearing concluded, the narrative was clear. Tyreek provided enormous sums voluntarily, made substantial expenditures, some aligned with need and others aligned with choice. Drew a line between essential support and discretionary spending, and meanwhile debated endlessly about fairness, entitlement, and responsibility in high-profile divorces. All the numbers, the filings, and the courtroom rulings, one truth remained stark: just a divorce. It wasn't in priorities. A warning about what happens when money flows freely without accountability. A cautionary tale for anyone who believes that wealth alone can prevent conflict. At the heart of all this financial and legal maneuvering was one undeniable reality. Caught between two powerful stories. Capri, still infant, would experience the consequences of these battles long before she could understand them. And reality is something that no court ruling, no public debate, and no luxury purchase can ever fully mitigate. Of Tyreek and Keeta shows how quickly fortune and trust can collide. Wake on this scandal. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines.